So before the draft, there would be an argument about which one of the Saints position groups was the strongest or the weakest or anywhere in between. Mostly to do they with new schemes coming in on both sides of the ball, new players, and even the returning players either declining and or just kind of weak in depth. It's real hard to box these down. I think the three arguably again strongest coming into the draft were cornerbacks, running back, and offensive line. I think coming out of the draft, they were definitely strengthened and maybe less of an argument that as we stand right now within the first week of the draft, they are the three strongest on the team. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So looking at the cornerback room, I'm gonna start there because in a weird sort of way, I always felt like that could possibly be the strongest room that we have from top to bottom going into the draft. And I think they did very well both in the draft and in undrafted portion of when we added the undrafted free agents. Because you rolled in with before we made our first pick, McKinstry and Alontae Taylor, the likely two starters. Right behind him, Isaac Yiadom, veteran guy. We had him in 2022 and 2023. In 23, he filled some holes, played very well for us. Went over last year to Frisco, kind of did the same thing. We brought him back in free agency. Thing with the Saints is over the last few years, as much as me and others complain about their draft and some of their signings and all, for the most part, they've been pretty good on the at cornerback. Drafted Taylor, you drafted McKinstry, you added guys like Rico Payton, who I haven't talked about as an undrafted free agent. You brought in guys that have given you some quality at times play when they had to come off the bench and fill in, like Ugo Amadi. And of course, Isaac Yiadom, who we just mentioned. You add into that, we also have Rezjon Wright and Travian Fluellen. Wright was on the roster last year and just kind of seemed to be circling about maybe getting on the field a little bit, maybe not. Didn't really do it as much. Travian Fluellen we signed at some point to the practice squad last year, late in the season, and he's still kind of on the roster, and we'll see what that turns into. So I can't really have much of an opinion there. We didn't see anything of him at all. But you look at going into the draft day, our top five, McKinstry, Taylor, Yiadom, I would say Rico Payton, who definitely proved himself on special teams. And we were hoping to see him more on the field during the course of the season. Didn't just quite happen for one reason or another. But I think a lot of people, what he showed in preseason, they may not be ready to stick him out on an island by himself and play man all game. But I think we go, hey, we can recognize there's some ability there. Can we tap into and get it better? And he's so good on special teams, the way he played last year. You can afford to kind of have that roster spot and hopefully develop him into something. Amadi is the security blanket of our secondary. It's a guy that at some point, since he's been a Saint, either by design, but more often by just having to fill in because of injuries or whatever, has basically played in every position at some point in the secondary. Kind of a jack of all trades. Now, I know what the second part of that saying is, master of none, probably true, but I don't, I don't look at it as a deterrent. That's why I'm hesitant to use that phrase, but it fits because I don't think he's intended to be the master of any. If he would happen to have done it over the course of his career, everybody would have been happy. But this coaching staff talks about position flexibility. He's shown it. Okay. And short burst at times. I think you just don't want to leave him out there for long periods of time, like some of the injury situations, especially last year, kept putting him in. You added Riley in the draft. Now, this is a kid that, look, since post draft coverage, he's the guy that people I see here and there go, he could eventually be a starting corner one day in the NFL. So if you say that, you think, well, at least if he doesn't reach that height, you kind of feel comfortable in going, yeah, but he should be able, if nothing else, be another Isaac Yiadom floating around on the back of your bench. And we talked about in the video where we covered him, scheme flexibility. Another one with position flexibility. He even talked about it in his first interview with the New Orleans media, playing inside and outside, loves doing both, doesn't mind going back and forth. Yeah, you do have a lot of flexibility in that room. I think you have a lot of ability. I think Taylor's the wild card in this because Taylor, the last 2 years, at first we had him on the outside in 23, looked great. We moved him to the inside, or when he first showed up. I wouldn't say he looked great, looked very good and very promising. We put him on the inside in 23. He struggles. Um, Last year looked a lot better. Then we had injuries and situations going. He goes back outside, and while I wouldn't say he struggled, he did get picked on a lot. So a bit of a struggle. But I think you got something there, and in that flexibility, it seemed to him moving him around was the issue. If just like leaving him in a spot and letting him go, he'd have been okay. But I feel a little more confident this coaching staff will not only know how to use him in that, they'll be able to teach him better how to do it and be prepared for it. And that could make all the difference in the world right there. And if they can, I think they'll be comfortable enough going, okay, either inside or outside, we're going to pick a spot and you're going to go be the best you can at doing that. So overall, going in and then taking that draft pick of Riley, I like what the Saints are doing in that room. And like I said, historically, the last few years, they've been very good at finding good fits and the right guys in there. We may not have had like the most awesome cornerback room in the NFL at any stretches in there. There may have been a couple of seasons where you could give it an argument, but I don't think we were ever anywhere near the worst compared to some of the other stuff you see out on the NFL fields trying to pass for corners. So I think we're okay there. And then we kind of went over the top in the undrafted free agent in Dallas Beanham. Had to make sure I get the right South Dakota State. 4-year guy. You go look at his numbers. 4-year solid guy. Some all conference and accolades like that on his name. Thing about South Dakota State is, yes, I know that's FCS. Not quite the Big Four power conferences and all, but don't make any mistake about there are some good football teams and good football players in there that do come out and play in the NFL. Quite a few of them are from South Dakota State, who's normally very, very good in that level of college football. So as an undrafted free agent, you look at him and you go, could we find the next Rico Payton? Which would be fantastic, because now you just help keep feeding that corner system that we've been able to do so you don't get run down and fall into positions that some NFL teams do where they're going to be in for a long season because, quite frankly, they have no ability to stop anybody on the outside. And once upon a time, the Saints had that problem. We all recognize what it is, but at least I feel right now, this group, I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. My worry in the passing game is actually in the front seven. Can they stop the run? And if they do and get into obvious passing situations, can they turn their high pressure rate they had last year into, I don't know, actual legitimate sacks? So you do that, then you'll really help this group out. Running back was a weird one to put in here because I was never quite sure what to do with running back because you got Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller on top of your depth chart. I don't think anybody questions their ability. We've seen what they can do. Now, Miller's sample size way smaller than Kamara's, but each of his 2 years, when healthy and on the field, he could make some plays, and everybody goes, man, we we like him at running back. We could really, really use him there. Problem is, injuries have kept him out. I know there's some talk going around, that he mentioned. So I didn't see the video. This is coming secondhand from T Bob and Jacob Hester on their morning show about recommitting and rededicating himself going into his third year because their point was, and I agree wholeheartedly, you're not a first round pick. So year 3 is your second to last year. So if you hadn't had all that worked out before, you better work it out now. Then it's incumbent on the team and him to do the best they can to keep him healthy from preventable injuries to see if he can go earn the spot. Because if he can, then you're good. Okay. Behind him, you had like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you have Mims, a few. They signed Valus Jones, who's kind of pinged around a running back and a receiver in his years in the NFL, and they have him listed as a running back. They signed Valladay late last season, I think, actually. Also, another running back there. You had a full room, okay, with two guys at the top that, when healthy, we feel confident, at least going into this season. Hilaire, trying to get him back to form. We talked about him before. Mims, I think Mims is just a solid NFL running back that are on a lot of NFL rosters. They may not wow you and dazzle you, and you probably don't want to try to get through a season with him touching the ball 300, 350 times. But I think at times he can come in and help you with some runs or some plays during the game. Great guy to have on your roster. But then you added Devin Neal, and you get him in the 6th round. We had a video on him, and all the rookie videos I'll put on the end card. Look, he's bringing production. He's bringing NFL size. He's bringing, you know, we talked about, there was concern about his 40 time and all, but it isn't bad. The NFL was questioning, is he really explosive? Can he really outrun people downfield? And I'm going, I don't know, man. I do know his senior year, he was almost 4 yards average after first contact. And I'm going, I may not need him to be a game breaker if he's going to run some point down the field, then gain another 4 yards on top of that after somebody hits him. It's a lot to like here. And look, Kendra keeps having his issues and can't find his way on the field. I'm confident Neal's going to fill the void. So you knew you had some talent there at this spot, especially in the top 2, some potential talent that they brought in, some potential ability. And at the very least, you were going to have a couple of running backs like Mims and probably Valus Jones that could come in and do some situational stuff enough. They've been around the league Mims is in his 2nd year, but Jones has been around the league a couple of years for a reason. You got some decent, but now Neal kind of takes it up to a whole new level. Kind of gives you legitimate depth, especially in the playmaking, regardless if Edwards-Helaire can get back to where he was. And if he does, then you've just added even more. So, I mean, this, as much as I was just talking up cornerbacks and feeling really, really good about it, this room is a healthy and ready to go Alvin Kamara and a healthy, ready to go Kendre Miller from being just stacked. And if they want to come in this year and run the ball, they're going to have or in theory and on paper, going to have quite a few weapons to be able to use to do it. So I know it sounds weird. I didn't think when I was trying to really look at the position groups and what we added in the draft to them, going offensive line was going to make the video as arguably one of the strongest groups that got a little stronger. Well, obviously got a little stronger with the Kelvin Banks Jr. pick. And I think this is more of the amount of bodies that they've added to this position combined with McCoy being one of the best centers in football, anchoring it, and potentially locking down 2 tackle spots with a couple of young football players that, we'll see how it works out if it goes that route. But position flexibility and them trying to at least plug and play and figuring it out in 2025, this may be a 2-year process to really get it where you want it, right? Complicates things. I'm going to pull up. I attempted to make a depth chart because as I was trying to go through this, it's just a little mind-boggling without looking at it on paper. And you really can't make a depth chart because is Fuaga, and it's the question marks. It's Fuaga staying on the left side. Is Sal DeVeri going to get a shot at left guard that he got last year that didn't pan out for mostly injury reasons? Clapp's a veteran backups, played guard and center. Is he in the mix? Hergel was left over from last year. You look at, they brought in Reduns. Is Reduns going to go at Penning at right tackle? Does Penning possibly move to guard? You have Landon Young floating around. And actually, Kelvin Banks, we're thinking left tackle, possibly Fuaga going to right tackle, right? But we don't know. We do know He is multifunctional, or he should be if everything is drafted is talked about. Anywhere on the offensive line should get a start or should be able to start. And then that may figure out, once you know what you're doing with him, where the rest of the slots are going to go with this. And then let's not forget Landon Young with his versatility, or you as a swing lineman. And then they brought in from Kansas State, undrafted free agent. And man, he's big. Easton Kitty, 6'6", 307 pounds. And look, you have a lot of players in this mix, okay? On an offensive line last year, there's likely, as a whole, considering everything they went through, let's call it an average NFL offensive line. To be fair, times you had some outliers where they played really, really well and really, really bad. But for the most part, I think they were consistently somewhere around average. Sometimes they'd float into above average. Sometimes they'd fall into below average, and kind of just depended on the situation, who was healthy, and not only an offensive line, who was healthy elsewhere on the offense. But what you got was a lot of guys coming back with some experience. You went out and got a guy like Reduns, who tackle, guard, where's he going to fit? But he seems to be a competent NFL lineman, at least of the vein of Lucas Patrick last year, who, and he was never, Lucas Patrick, no offense, never going to a Pro Bowl, but he served his purpose of what we were trying to get out of him last year. And at times he played really, really well. And at times he had to fill in out of position to try to keep the line together. So I think you can get a lot of that. But think about what Fuaga did last year as a rookie, moving left tackle, which he did not play in college. And in fact, Banks, a 3-year starter at left tackle in college, is coming in hopefully along the same lines. Fuaga developed, I think, pretty good last year. As the season wore on, you had to deal with a lot. I mean, some rookie stuff, mistakes, and some being moved to left tackle mistakes. There's no doubt about it. Can he play better? Absolutely. He would probably tell you that. But I think if you can get that progress moving to reach his full potential that you drafted him with, you'll be fine, no matter where he plays. I think they look at Kelvin Banks pretty much the same way. And a lot of this, like I said, it just may depend on where Banks slots into this to where they can slot everybody else. But you potentially, if you can fix some of the problems you fixed last year, if you can continue Fuaga's development, you finally got something out of Penning. You got more out of Ruiz than you had gotten in the previous seasons. If you can continue that trend, all of a sudden you have something to build in. Got to keep them healthy and on the field. Now you're building around something, and now instead of trying to fill potentially 3 slots on that offensive line, you might just be down to figuring out who the left guard is, and that may actually be Trevor Penning for all we know. So I think it's not set in stone, and these guys are going to have to play hard, play better. There's no doubt about that. And the key is development and getting guys in the right scheme in the right spot. But we keep getting told that's what this coaching staff's forte is. So if they can do that, they have bodies there to work with to figure it out until they bring in potentially the guys they need to bring the offensive line up from average above average to good and better. Because once you do that, now you're a serious team with a serious offense. My take is obviously what I think was the strongest got a little stronger in what we did over this past weekend. Good. What that means as far as anything else, I don't know, because even though this may be our 3 strongest position groups, they could still be among the weakest in the NFL along with the rest of our team. But at least in a spirit of trying to stay with the positive vibes, let's look at what we're hopefully a position that's going to play well and be deep enough to bring consistent good play to the field. And I think that's probably your 3 best bets right now. We'll know a lot more after OTAs, minicamp, and training camp, and definitely once the season starts. So we'll see how it works out. First time here, please go ahead, hit the like for me, hit the subscribe button, feed that algorithm, drop it down in the comments. Let me know what y'all think. And I'm going to go through each position group eventually on the Saints. So if you want to throw out the one you think it is, just to let you know, yeah, I'm going to get to it eventually, and then we'll have the whole um, thought process comparing what you may think of these three versus the ones that I'm going to cover in the next probably 2 videos to get through all of them. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.